business, so the frivolity has ended. Today, everyone, I see we have a group of people. I know we don't all know each other, but we know most of them. And we appreciate you being able to show up and participate in today's discussion. A couple things before we get rolling. One of the things I wanted to announce is that starting next month, we're having another virtual academy on arbitration. It's going to consist of 7 sessions. The first session is going to be on January 7th, and the speaker will be Aaron Schmidt, who ironically is also a former SERB board member. He was vice chairman and since has moved on to the American Arbitration Association as a vice president. His topic is going to be just on the general issue of arbitration, but we have 6 others that follow, and it'll be done weekly. Check our website for how this, what the details are for to work on this and participate. Last year we did this, and I don't mind telling you, I thought it was terrific. I thought it worked out really well. During the height of the pandemic, we were able to get together and get some information on how stuff works in arbitration and in the virtual world. And because of that, I think last year, at least for arbitrations, things went on pretty smoothly. Getting to our main speaker today, the person you're going to have is Craig Zimpher, who's the chairman of the State Employment Relations Board. I've known Craig since 2011. I met him at a hearing, and that was his first day on the job. It was the city of Toledo with that wonderful topic, exigent circumstances, and we know how that all went. But nevertheless, since then, I joined SERB, and we've weathered numerous, I don't want to use the word crises, but challenges, dealing everything from strikes and exigent circumstances and emergency decisions on whether a strike is unlawful or not. So, well, Craig personally, though, has a history of public service. He's worked for the governor of Ohio, Jim Rhodes. He's also worked as the chairman of the Industrial Commission, and also in his current position as chairman of the State Employment Relations Board. The way we're going to handle it today is he's going to talk about SERB over the last year, and we'll take questions at the end. And if I have something burning, I'm just going to jump in and ignore that. But nevertheless, that's how we plan on doing it. With that, it's my privilege and honor to introduce Craig Zimpher. Craig, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Don. It is a pleasure to be with you. Well, just this morning and this afternoon. It's high noon. So I'm very glad to be with you. I probably would prefer to be with you in person out at the Confluence Park restaurant, but nonetheless, it's good to be with you in this alternative way. I was asked to speak about SERB's operations or functions during the pandemic, or I guess probably more accurately during the lockdown period, because I'm not sure the pandemic is over or under control. But we'll talk about SERB's functions, how we accomplished our mission, which is to promote orderly and constructive labor relations in the public and private sector in Ohio, and how we were able to hopefully accomplish that, or at least play a role in getting that done. But I'm also confident that what I'll discuss today is probably very similar to what most of you, whether you're in labor or management, what each of you has been through during the last 15 to 16 months. We're not that unique. We've all been faced with challenges and the need to be creative and innovative in how we accomplish our missions. With the onslaught of the COVID situation, first called a crisis, then a pandemic, the Ohio Department of Health, as many of you know, issued several executive orders to contain or limit the disease's spread. The one that brings me here today essentially closed non-emergency operations in the state of Ohio. obviously highway patrol, prison operations, medical, critical care positions were kept open, but non-emergency, non-quote essential, end quote, as they were called, operations were closed. And the effective date for that was March 16th, 2020, almost 16 months ago. The order also significantly restricted events involving gatherings of 10 or more people. And that executive order posed issues for everyone. For us at SERB, two immediate issues came to mind. One was, as many of you know, you've either attended or participated in SERB academies, the 2-day training programs we offer every year to present training and education in the labor relations sphere. And we had a SERB Academy scheduled for April of that year, of 2020. There was also a Personnel Board of Review conference scheduled, I think, a little bit later than that. And we had to discuss what to do about that. And we decided, based on the wording of the resolution or the executive order that was in play, to cancel the SERB Academy and the PBR Academy. And we had to do that relatively quickly because we had around 180 people scheduled for the SERB Academy. So those two training programs, unfortunately, were canceled, and we just at that point in time didn't really have the technology at hand or the understanding of what we could do, frankly, to be able to do those conferences virtually. The second challenge, or the second issue, was a conference call that was conducted by the governor's office before the actual closing date to discuss future operations in state agencies, boards, or commissions. And it was very clear in the course of that conversation, of that conference call, that we were going to be looking at a lockdown, a closed down situation. So we determined a couple things. One, we discussed with our systems colleagues our capability to provide hardware and linkages for each of our associates from an in-home remote environment. And then we announced to our associates that on effective Monday, March 16th, we were to go live from home. And our systems manager, who's sitting next to me here today, Mr. Justin Brown, let me also just mention, I have two very valuable colleagues here with me today, who I know you all know, Robert Feckety and Mike Allen, are in the room with me. But Justin and his folks work with each of our associates to make sure they had the appropriate equipment and understanding and abilities to complete their assignments from home and not in the office. So we posted on our SERB website this new arrangement. In-person meetings and hearings were canceled. They were rescheduled to a Teams Microsoft system. During that period, from March until July 1st of this year, let me just share some data points with you that will reflect the level of work that we were able to accomplish. During that period, we conducted 22 SERB board meetings. And we obviously had, in our public postings, we had to post these. These were all done telephonically. But we didn't miss one meeting. We maintained our schedule. During those meetings, we adjudicated 390 unfair labor practice charges and 272 representation matters. During the same period, also 47 hearings conducted remotely by SERB and PBR, 64 days of hearings. Now, some of those hearings, quote unquote, were occupied with several issues or several matters that may have been filed. Our mediators remained engaged through their remote capabilities. 29 collective bargaining mediations were conducted remotely by then we had actually had 2.5, one intermittent, 2.5 mediators involving 183 meetings by Microsoft Teams. and resulting in 21 settlements. During the period also, there's 301 unfair labor practice charges were filed. That was down, and Mike can correct me if I misspeak, but that was down slightly from what would be a typical similar historical period. Not significantly, but marginally, we saw a decrease in the filings of unfair labor practice charges by either labor or management. One of the very positive outcomes of this work environment was that we were able to reduce the processing time for unfair labor practices to 76 days and 103 days for processing representation matters involving union elections, et cetera. That is significantly below our standard matrix, which is 120 days. So the work was being turned out. It was being churned out very effectively. During the same period, we also received 1,505 contracts. Those contracts were reviewed and entered into our system, into our website, into our database, which I know all of you are familiar with because I know most of you file research requests here at SERB. But that was a significant amount of work done, 1,505 contracts to be reviewed and the data entered into the system. Similarly, 705 clearinghouse research requests were responded to. That's about 48 or so a month. Again, many of you will file a research request here, and they vary in their nature. One may come in from a city asking for comparables for other similarly sized cities throughout the state of Ohio. There are literally dozens and dozens of kinds of requests that we get. And we were able to turn those requests around in an average of 1.5 days, which I was very proud of our staff in being able to do. It was actually 1.96 days to turn around a clearinghouse request. During that time, the board also conducted 2 emergency hearings under section 41-17-23. Motions can be filed with SERB alleging an unauthorized strike. There were 2 such motions filed during the period. The board conducted remote hearings. One matter went to a full hearing. The other was settled before the hearing actually began. Now, I've also been asked, how do you monitor this work environment? And I'm, as you can tell by looking at me, I'm probably old school. I both in my prior government and 29 years of corporate experience was never a true believer, quote unquote, in remote, out of the office work environments. In certain circumstances, I understood they could work, but I was never convinced that environment could be utilized as efficiently as the classic in-office, in-person environment. And I think I speak for a lot of people. Several of I know my 2 board colleagues share the same sentiment, but I have my mind has been changed. I have seen the light. I have seen that work can be done efficiently and effectively. We don't have a measurement system registering every time an associate hits the keyboard. Our people are not doing, they're not doing the classic data entry, by which you can monitor by second how many times a keyboard's hit. But I think I attribute our compliance and our success, our delivery on essentially two issues, two factors. One, we are, and I think Don and those of you who have experienced work at SERB, I hope you will test it. I'm proud that we have a dedicated group of associates who value and respect their work. They take our mission seriously. They take their work seriously. They are truly dedicated public servants, and they are working 8.5 hours or more a day. And How do we know that? Because secondly, we have supervisors who know how to monitor work assignments. They know how to monitor loads. They know how to monitor production and review production. And they know the work that's being assigned, whether it's an unfair labor practice charge to an investigator, whether it's a research assignment to somebody in our research and training section. They're very capable and very able in monitoring work completion. And those are the two ways we have of, I guess, evaluating our work production. Thirdly, when this environment began, I initiated a bi-weekly conference call with the 3 board members and each of our managers here at SERB. Every other Friday morning, we had a regular conference call where any and all matters that needed to be discussed, needed to be resolved, the board needed to be briefed on. All of those issues were discussed in those bi-weekly conference calls. And we had one literally, I think there was maybe one period when vacations, et cetera, in the summer, but every other week we had one of those regular conference calls that were invaluable for the board members, particularly to have a good understanding of what was transpiring, what the issues were, what the problems were, what needed to be addressed. So it kept us current and on top of the topic, on top of the issues. And then, as you know, this past July, there was a fair amount of controversy in the General Assembly in terms of whether or not to continue or to extend the emergency legislation that had given the governor's health department the grant of authority to adopt its emergency rules. And the legislature, in its wisdom, failed to renew or extend that legislation. And it expired on, I believe it was July 1st. Wasn't it, Mike? July 1st. I can't remember what day of the week that was, but it was July 1st. That emergency legislation expired. And with it, correspondingly, the governor's authority to take certain actions, including our ability to continue conducting remote, not in-person hearings. So as of July, the following Monday, whatever the effective date was, whatever the date was, we returned to in-person live meetings and hearings. I know there were some agencies or some boards that may have construed the legal authority a little differently, but we did a very thorough review and were convinced that there was just not much room to move, that the hearings and board meetings really had to be done in person. There was no alternative. So we have since July returned to in-person board meetings. The Personnel Board Review has returned in-person board meetings, and all of our hearings have been done in person now. And as far as I can tell or discern, that's probably the way it's going to continue to be. I don't know that I can foretell or see a return to that emergency authority that would cause us to do things other than in person. Our work environment at SERB has remained hybrid. The only conditions that we put on it were that we have 2 people in our clerk's office. They are working in the office because they're the people who have to capture the documents and the emails as they're filed and get them distributed to the respective managers. But the condition is, in terms of hybrid at-home work, our staff can and may continue to do that if that's what they would prefer to do. If they prefer to come back to the office, that's fine too. We have 100%. I'm really proud. SERB was the highest ranked agency or board or commission of any board or commission or agency in the state with 100% completion of vaccination this fall. So I think we have as safe an environment as possible. So if people want to come back to their office, they can. Most of our employees, I can't tell exactly how many, but I know the majority of our employees, though, are continuing to work from home. And they can do that with a proviso, though, that if the manager or their manager wants to or needs to have an in-person staff meeting or some kind of a training opportunity or whatever, then the expectation is that the individuals would return to the office for that opportunity or for that to meet that need. I mean, I hate to be crass and sound somewhat crude, but let's face it. People are hired, and when they're hired, most of our folks were all hired before the pandemic. They were hired to work in an office. They knew they were going to work in an office. So I think the expectation if there's a need to return for a half a day or so for legitimate business purposes, our folks will be doing that. Don, that really sort of completes our experiences here at SERB. Justin reminded me, I want to just put a plug in here too, that on April 20 and 21, SERB will be returning to in-person, the SERB Academy. It will be in-person. Information is not on the website yet, but right after the first of the year, registration information will be available to anyone. Our staff is really looking forward to returning to in-person training. We try to, those of you who have been at SERB Academies or those of my colleagues who participate, this is really a hands-on experiential opportunity, largely for people who may actually be new to the whole labor relations, the whole negotiation process. So we try to make it as meaningful as possible, and that involves in-person work and assignments and lessons. So our folks are really excited about that opportunity. Let's hope we're not into the 23rd iteration of a variant and things continue to, hopefully, if they can, I don't know if they're improving, but let's hope the situation permits us by that time to have this kind of a live academy. So I invite all of you after the first to visit our website, check out the registration and plan to attend if you can. Don, that may be shorter than Justin told me. Somebody told me I had an hour to speak, and you know me,
if you have that much time, you'll take it.
I don't think I have an hour to speak.
Hey, I have
what's the old adage? If I had more time, I would have sent you a shorter letter. So I think I've captured everything that's appropriate, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
I've gone on the SERB website over the last year or so, and I've noticed for whatever reason there seem to be more strike notices filed than what I was experienced in the past. My question is, and I don't know if this is for you or Mike or Robert, but what's that all about? Has it been just normal typical labor relations, or has there been any kind of implications of the folks relating to COVID and the pandemic? I've done a number of fact findings over the last year, and one of the things that surprised me is that these folks didn't necessarily have the opportunity to meet in person a lot. And so they did it virtually or by conference call, and that kind of strained the negotiations and kind of contributed to impasse in my mind. My question is that sort of what their service experienced, or?
I can't tell you right off the top of my head, Don, how many strike notices we've received during that period. I think it's probably around 4 or 5. Mike, Robert, you guys?
No, there might be more than that, because some of them were renewed, but then ultimately there may have been more than one strike notice having to do with the same bargaining unit, but it still didn't lead to a strike.
Yeah, I mean, there were very few. The 2 unauthorized strikes that we adjudicated, one was settled, and the other was a group of bus drivers. It was a sort of a wildcat strike situation in Fairborn that we found an unauthorized strike. That was our finding. We've had is it fair to say that the majority of these have been resolved and settled or withdrawn?
Yeah, definitely.
We had a strike notice
Much
filed in
more.
the city of Akron, the Akron Regional Transit Authority, which that was earlier. I was in October, I think, or maybe November, early November, that we were obviously concerned about. That, excuse me, that notice was withdrawn. So I'm not sure whether they've reached a final agreement, but I know the strike notice was withdrawn and they returned to the table and they returned to discussions. That was maybe the most, of course, every strike's significant, but that was probably of all, and that was the largest potential one in terms of size. And you were here, you lived through the Dayton Regional Transit Authority short strike. So those can be very troubling and troublesome, but that was withdrawn. So I don't know that it's certainly not significantly higher in volume of filings. I'm looking to my colleagues. Is that a fair statement?
I think it's a fair statement.
Yeah, the pool might be too small to ascribe any statistical significance to it.
Did you hear that comment from Mike?
I did not.
Mike said, made the observation, the statistical pool, meaning the filings, may be far too small to draw any conclusions from it.
Okay. Second question, and Robert alluded to this. Have you had any ULPs related to, COVID issues brought on by COVID that you can?
We've had some, I think we were talking earlier. We've had some that are COVID related. I'm frankly, I was expecting much more volume, much more activity in ULPs related to COVID, whatever nature. But Robert's been managing that section during most of the pandemic. What are your thoughts on? Can you, Don? Can you hear Robert? He's going to speak now.
All right.
So, I mean, we definitely have had some, I mean, like the chairman said, maybe not to the numbers that we initially anticipated, but there have been some, oftentimes over some policies that were implemented initially, especially earlier on in the pandemic, whether it be regards to people working out of the office or testing or those other sorts of issues.
Hiring temporary help, non-bargaining unit positions being filled, a couple of those situations.
Right. But by and large, even within those filings, by and large, most of them have not reached the level of a statutory violation for various reasons that were involved in those particular cases.
We did not find, bottom line is, I don't believe we found probable cause in any of those limited number of cases we had. We didn't find probable cause in any of those cases that may have been related to COVID. The bus strike in Fairborn was somewhat COVID related because, concerns by the drivers and the drivers not showing up. And does that answer your question, Don?
It does. It does. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you're telling me it's not the deluge of
Not yet.
ULPs, but rather, minor, we had a few, but they're not rising to the level of a class action antitrust case yet. So.
No, certainly not yet.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? Okay. Not hearing anything else. Craig, I want to thank you for your commentary today.
Sure.
I'm going to say this in a nutshell, but apparently, SERB keeps on, but we just haven't seen a tremendous amount of change brought about by the COVID. But folks are getting along, doing stuff virtually, and to the extent they can, seeing what's going to happen down the road. So
I think the work paradigm has and is and will continue to change in ways that some of us can anticipate and some of us probably can't even begin to anticipate now.
No, yeah, I
It's
agree. That's the-
obviously it will have a significant sort of tectonic effect.
That's the
I
big
wouldn't
change.
rush out and invest in any commercial real estate right now.
All right, all right.
Okay.
Very good, very good.
There's my freebie for the day.
All right. Not hearing any other questions, I want to thank you and
Our
I
pleasure.
think we just remind everyone about the our virtual academy that's starting January 7th. And as I mentioned, our first speaker is going to be Aaron Schmidt, who was the vice president or vice chairman of the State Employment Relations Board. So opportunity to get a twofer here, all within a period of several weeks. So, all right. Thank you very much, Craig. I appreciate it. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Merry Christmas. Have a great holiday.
Thank you. You too.
Okay.
All right. With that, that's the end of this meeting, unless you have any other comments, let me know and we'll respond to it. So